Look, I guess it's an uncertain time that we are in currently in South Africa. COVID-19 has its tentacles, so to speak, in every aspect of our lives. And I guess by-elections is no exception. Tell us the impact that COVID-19 is having on such elections.
Well, it's expected that in terms of COVID-19, there will be an impact in terms of the planned by-elections and also in other areas of work for municipalities. As you would know, you have cited an example of Tshwane, which is quite a unique case. Tshwane has recently been placed under administration as recent as last week. And obviously that kind of administration completely dissolved council, which means there is supposed to be elections held within 90 days in terms of by-elections to constitute a new council. And there are other municipalities who also experience the same expectation of conducting by-elections. So the current regulations in respect of COVID-19 blame provide for such eventuality. For instance, in Tshwane, it's supposed to have by-elections across all its wards within 90 days of the council being dissolved. And of course, we can't have that 90 days, given the fact that by-elections are inherently a political program. So you require councillors to go through all areas and make sure that they campaign. And when you look at the COVID-19 regulations, such activity where it is mass-based are expressly prohibited. And that's the same impact in other areas as well. So what has IEC done has gone to court, to the Federal Court, to ask for a further 30 days beyond the 90 days. So if you count, the first 90 days would have been towards end of April, May, June. So they've extended for another 30 days beyond that, likely towards end of July. And if the situation normalizes back, meaning there's no lockdown, there's no shutdown, then it means political activity can take place across the country and by-elections across the board may then be considered. However, if it doesn't happen, then it means the current state of extension may be considered on merit grounds by our courts to make sure that we don't have that. But that's one aspect of the COVID response. The other elements, Blaine, pertain to the regulations insofar as what municipalities ought to do to respond to the COVID-19 calamity that we have as a country.
Before we go there, Mr. George, I just want to just get back to the elections before we tackled the other impacts that COVID-19 is having on various aspects of our lives. With regards to these by-elections, look, we've got this 21-day lockdown now. It doesn't mean that at the end of 21 days, we'll be rid of COVID-19. Experts say we are likely to live with it much longer than that. Would it be safe to say that we are highly unlikely to have by-elections this year, or am I jumping the gun there?
I would think that we shouldn't be ahead, given the fact that by-elections are regulated and legislated. They have to take place within a certain prescribed time limits. But of course, there's a contextual basis now in terms of the current disaster that is happening across the world. So it is being assessed. Beyond this period that there's a declared shutdown, there will be an assessment beyond that. But I'm saying in respect of Tshwane, there's already an extra 30 days that has been procured in terms of our courts granting that. So I wouldn't say that we should not even anticipate that there will be no by-elections this year. However, should there be a march towards 2021, again, legislation provides that within a certain period, there may no longer be certain by-elections whatsoever. And unfortunately, we haven't reached that stage yet.
Look, the lockdown, the impact of the lockdown, especially on municipalities, has far-reaching implications. Tell us about this.
Well, the regulations that have been issued in terms of the Disaster Management Act by the Minister of Cooperative Governance and also the directives issued to municipalities, Blaine, they are quite comprehensive and they provide specific measures that municipalities have to comply with in terms of complementing a whole range of efforts that are being done by other sector departments, in particular, the leading Department of Health that is at the forefront of the fight against the spread of the coronavirus. For instance, in respect of municipalities, there's about eight specific areas of directives in which we have to respond to as municipalities. These range from ensuring that in respect of water provision and sanitation, municipalities must provide water and sanitation on an uninterrupted basis across the board.
They must, Mr. George, but are they?
That also includes municipalities where there is no water at all in certain communities, as we know. That's one element.
Mr. George, if I can come in, so they must. You would agree, we all agree that they must,
yes,
municipalities provide water, but are they? Because I think things need to move faster than normally things would move in the past, because we're dealing with a very determined disease here. What's the word on the ground? Have things improved over the last week or so in terms of getting access to water?
I'll say yes, Blaine, in the sense that last week there is extra measures that have been put in place. For instance, our engagement with the Minister of Water and Sanitation, there's now 41,000 water tanks, mobile water tanks, right, that have been made available, distributed across the country. And that is specifically targeting settlements within municipalities. And we've seen our municipalities receiving those mobile water tanks. In communities where there is reliable water provision, that is continuing as we speak. So as SALGA, we are monitoring daily across the municipalities. I receive reports across the board in terms of where we are, in terms of ensuring that those measures for water, sanitation, sanitizing our taxi ranks, sanitizing pavements, and also making sure that our essential services run in terms of those provisions. Yeah. Those things are happening. In instances where municipalities are severely constrained, as we know, they don't have capacity, there is extra measures that are being in place by various sector departments to provide support. For instance, our Department of Corporate Governance has made available funds in terms of the Disaster Fund Act to make sure municipalities can access those funds, yeah, and make sure that those directives of the minister are actually adhered to.
We're talking about compliance. We're talking about adhering to the new regulations. We've been asking our viewers as well, are they taking this disease seriously in order to keep to the lockdown regulations? The Minister of COGTA has issued a number of directives. What sort of reports are you getting from municipalities? Are they adhering to these directives?
Indeed, Blaine, they are adhering. For instance, Johannesburg, out of its 79 clinics, it has made available 19 clinics as part of the quarantine sites. Right. They have also made sure that in all those clinics, in Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, Johannesburg, as an example, these are our major cities in South Africa. They also provide sanitation services, including isolation sites in those facilities. In addition, a number of taxi ranks are being sanitized across the board. People who have been staying in the streets, the most unfortunate and vulnerable of our society, they are being taken to places of shelter. And Johannesburg has identified 179 of those centers that are being identified for housing people who are displaced and or homeless. Yeah. And we are getting reports across the board where municipalities are making contact visit to taxi ranks. Others are part of ensuring enforcement measures in roadblocks. Others are providing support to social services in terms of SASA, the issues that we have seen over the last 2 days where there's been limitations exposed. Municipalities are also reinforcing that capacity, yeah, to make sure that there's smooth operation around those areas. Others have even gone further, Blaine, in terms of identifying tracing teams where there's been detected cases. They work collaboratively with the Department of Health to make sure that tracing teams of doctors, nurses, environmental health officers, they form part of those tracing teams to identify people that needs to be tested and or quarantined in terms of those measures that we all need to come. So I'm saying a whole range of measures are being done, from law enforcement to provision of services, and also ensuring that decision-making take place at municipalities in a manner that expedites the speedy response that we need. Look, there will always be difficulties, of course, as we all know. Of course. Yeah. But we are constantly monitoring that situation, working with our Disaster Management Center at the Department of Corporate Governance.
We have to applaud the essential service workers who are going out there daily in order to keep local government ticking during this uncertain time. Those workers that provide, the sanitation, involved in the sanitation field, waste removal as well. I mean, these are times where you're not sure in terms of the proper protocol, because this disease is changing in terms of the information that we're getting. It's, we're learning more and more about this disease all the time. It's not that the disease is changing, it's the information that is coming out there that we're learning. With regards to the personal protective equipment that these essential workers need to have, do they have it?
Yes, Blaine, they do have it. I'm giving you examples. For instance, in many of our cities, I receive reports, and our frontline staff, I'll use Johannesburg, the Pick It Up team that you will be familiar with. They receive this protective clothing as part of their cycle of running the collection of waste bins. And we are also having communication from our cities to gated communities and communities at large to make sure that people must also make sure that when they take their bins, roller bins outside, or plastics are concealed properly, and roller bins, people apply detergents around before they hand them outside. Right. With regard to frontline staff, our unsung heroes that day to day work in our refuse removal sites and disposal systems around water and waste treatment plants, those people receive protective clothing in the form of gloves, in the form of masks, in the form of overalls, and strict adherence to those protocols are being monitored by managers in those municipal-owned entities. And we're beginning to see that happening across the board. What we are not saying, and we will never say, Blaine, is that there may not be instances where there is flagrant disregard of those. It's important that when those instances are detected, we expect municipalities to act decisively to make sure that where provision of protective clothing has been provided and people disregard those, there must be measures, because we cannot afford at all to have any instances where there's recklessness in such a situation where there is a real threat to life in terms of coronavirus. Important point
there, Mr. George. I just want to get your last thoughts on a very important issue that was discussed yesterday. In fact, the Minister of Small Business talking about the support scheme, especially for spaza shop owners. What's your role in this in trying to, give some support, I guess, for those spaza shop owners who are, I guess, some of them are battling at this time?
Indeed, Blaine, we've got 2.89 million informal sector in South Africa, people who eke out a living every day to make sure that they can be in a position to survive and fend for their own families. They are the hardest hit given the lockdown that we are experiencing as a country. So we are discussing these measures at the highest level, and as SALGA, we're part of the National Joints team that looks at a range of measures. And we were discussing some of these measures yesterday. And in my discussion with the Minister of Small Business Development, I have issued a communication to all municipalities this morning that will make sure that we collect all the data in terms of databases of all spaza shop, of all traders, and informal traders in particular, and people who are operating in our own municipalities, licensed and unlicensed. So on the basis of those who are unlicensed, we also expedite as municipalities to issue them with trading permits that takes into account their own status as South Africans, and also for non-South Africans to make sure that they can benefit from this package that the minister has outlined to provide not only seed funding for them to restart their business beyond the lockdown period, but also to have credit line facilities to be able to acquire stock, working capital, to be able to get back into their own normal working life. And we're calling on everyone to cooperate, private sector, to make sure that those who can also express donations to municipalities, they must work closely with our mayors in various cities and towns and regions and districts to make sure that we lend a hand in the most caring way that we're all known as South Africans.
Mr. George, these are important issues to discuss. That's why we give you the length of time that we just gave you now in terms of this interview. But we do thank you very much indeed, sir, for coming through and giving us your perspective on things. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Blaine. Thank you.